Ryan, I need you to. I'm afraid I need you to fill for 30 seconds.
30
Say hello
seconds.
to
I'm
everyone.
trying to get the chat up because I'm not prepared either. But you've literally
It's all
left,
right. It's all
haven't
right.
you?
I'm back. I'm back.
You've
It's
literally
fine.
left. So
Ah, peace in the room.
we were both very unprepared for this. Oh,
2020.
1 second.
I can hear your. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just because I'm trying to get the live stream up so I can see the chat. There you
Gotcha.
go.
Well, I'll fill in that case while we're waiting. So, hello everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the Prestige Reef Dork show. I've that thing was making a load of noise, and I had to turn it off, and I was waiting for it to finish, and it finished 5 minutes later than it should have done. But we are here now, and let's see what's going on. So, today we're going to be talking about parameters, numbers. Ryan, everyone
Very
loves numbers,
exciting.
don't they? This is very exciting. So there's kind of a few things. The main ones that I want to talk about are salinity, temperature, nitrate, phosphate, calcium, magnesium. I've missed alkalinity and trace elements.
Sounds good to me. I see my
So
rival is in the chat. I see the Ocean Project here. I'm not
yeah, the
sure if
best.
I'm over the fact that I was discarded.
My
Last.
favourite guest, to be honest, of all the people I have on.
Oh
So
well,
it's
Sean.
my
Yes, yeah.
proper
No, I
guest. Yeah.
understand why. I understand why. But you know what happened? Literally just after the live stream, everyone with Sean. Alex sent me a message. Oh yeah, you up for next week? Came crawling back. You
Yeah,
know.
and you came crawling back as well.
No, I didn't come crawling back. I've played
Well,
hard
you're
to get
here.
for like 10 seconds, and they was like, "Yeah, I miss you so much."
Please. I know, yeah. We just have a cuddle. But, right. So first off, then, there were a couple of actually comments from the chat before the stream started. Someone was asking about how long lights are on for. Oh, I can hear myself now. Let me pause that. And I didn't see the comments before. I think there was a question before that which I can't see, but. This guy Darren Rivers. Darren, are you in the chat? What was your question? You were asking about lights, and your lights are for 12 hours. My lights are for 12 hours too.
Mine are the
You were
same.
told, yeah, yours the same. You were told it should be a maximum of 10 hours, including evening blues, by La Moustache de Calais, who is still in the chat now. I think 12 is fine personally, but anyway,
No more than 12. There's
no
a
more than
there's a
I would
maximum
agree.
amount of photosynthesis that zooxanthellae can do. Bloody hell, that was a hard sentence.
Yeah,
And they can't do any more after 12. So
there you go. Probably, yeah, okay, maybe even less. And Les, I can't find your comment. There we go. Yeah, I've got you out of a trip to the mother-in-law, which is it's a pretty poor excuse actually, Les. To be honest, I can't go and see you, your mother, darling, because I've got to watch some slaphead talk to Prestige Reef on the internet about fish for 2 hours. Anyway, what else have we got? There were a couple other things that I wanted to pull up. One of them was Ryan is
that's what I was
Prestige Reef is
laughing
like
at.
pulsing xenia. Can't shake him off. Just you think you've got rid of him, you leave a tiny little bit and he comes back.
Yeah. So
But yes, there was another one as well. That was someone was asking how your tank is. How's the leak? And I think it was John Wright. I've lost it though.
that was the
Chris
video.
Allen.
The end of that video was filmed on Monday last week.
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry, Monday this week. So during the live stream last week, it was actually good that I wasn't here because pretty much just as the live stream started, I walked in, or when I would be talking to you, obviously we have a little chat before. I walked into the coral room and I was like, "Oh no," because there was water everywhere. I was like, "That this is not normal." So I wouldn't have been able to make it last week anyway. So
Right. Okay.
it's all good now anyway.
It's fixed. Did you? Because you put like half a gallon of silicon on it.
Yes.
But have you had the proper fix done now?
The proper fix has not been done yet. The person who
Okay.
can proper fix it is coming back in a week. So, but the amount of silicon I used, I reckon that will last forever.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried.
Fair enough. Yeah. It's just good stuff. I had a major. I tried to change when I did my diaphragm valve on the Red Sea Reefer. I made the pipe work myself, and all the bits I silicon together work. The one bit that I bought already silicon from Red Sea had a tiny pinprick leak in it.
Oh really?
tiny, but
Yeah.
it still dripped every like 10 seconds, and it was a frigging nightmare. But it just took a few hours to sort it. But you put silicone in the right place, and that's it. You're done for life, basically.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. And La Moustache, we will be talking about pH. In fact, we'll start with pH in a sense, because I wanted to talk about calc, and I'm going to use one of the member questions to deal with this. So Push Button Reef says, if I should have posted this up on the little comment thing beforehand. He says, so kalkwasser, I think Alex is dosing through auto top off. He's not, but I'm guessing Ryan has to be more precise. Is kalkwasser the definitive solution to all? And I'd like to know if your experience shows it brings pH in line, as my pH is too low. So first off, I don't put my kalkwasser in the auto top off, and I think that's a dated way of doing it, and I think it's possible to do it that way, but it's the worst way to do it, I think. The questions you're asking have been answered in my video from Friday. I don't know if you've seen it already. I've done like a 9-month review of kalkwasser, my experiences with kalkwasser, and it does flatten off my pH. I dose it overnight, and it flattens my pH curve, not completely flat, but much flatter than it was before. And it used to, my pH, the lowest it got was 7.65, which was really bad. And now the lowest it goes is like 8.2 or something. So much better. But the reason I wanted to talk about that question first was because the one question I get asked the most on all of my kalkwasser videos is, well, actually there are two questions. The first one is, doesn't dosing kalkwasser dangerously increase your alkalinity? And that, for at the face of it, that feels like an odd question to me, because no, it shouldn't do, because that's what its job is. Kalkwasser, and I think this question is born out of a misunderstanding of the purpose of kalkwasser, because everybody talks about it in the context of pH. I think that's what people think it's for, but it's not. It's like thinking of, what's the stuff they give you at the dentist? Nitrous oxide. Okay, they give you that stuff.
Where is this going?
This is right. So they give you nitrous oxide in the dentist to sedate you, and so you don't feel the pain. As a side effect, it makes you bloody loopy and say all sorts of crazy stuff, and it gets you high. But that's not why they give it to you. They give it to you to numb the pain. Kalkwasser, it does boost pH, but that's not why you should use it. You should use it to replace your calcium and alkalinity. Use it as a dosing, and as a side effect, a nice side effect, it bumps your pH up as well. So if you're just using kalkwasser, only reason is to increase your pH. Yeah, it's going to increase your alk. Yeah, because you're basically overdosing. Kalkwasser is dosing. It's a 2-part dosing replacement, basically. So if you put too much in and you're just trying to focus on get your pH up, you're damn right your alkalinity is going to go dangerously high. And so there's another point I'll come on to, but the other thing is that ties into this is the Chris Meckley effect. So Chris Meckley, ACO Agriculture, has talked about calc a lot and talked about pH a lot, but he does some crazy things, brilliant crazy, and I admire him for doing it. And he's bringing up some fantastic results, but that is cutting edge, bleeding edge of the hobby that the likes of you and I should not be touching. But what he does is he doses a very strong solution, not just calcium hydroxide, which is kalkwasser, sodium hydroxide, which is burns through your skin, and even more toxic things than that. And he pins his pH so it is dead level at 8.3 all day. And he says, I don't care what my alkalinity is. It can go to 15 for all I care. It's not important as long as my pH is 8.3. For him, that's fantastic. He's got like a 2-acre farm. He knows what he's doing. He's been in the hobby for years. He's using all sorts of precautions. He's at the cutting edge of the hobby. For you and I, we should be caring about alkalinity. Absolutely. Just because suddenly there's been talk of pH being important doesn't mean you forget about alkalinity. Alkalinity's still got to be stable. And if you're dosing so much kalkwasser to boost your pH that it's throwing your alkalinity through the roof, dose less. And if that means that your pH doesn't get the boost that you want it to, that's just the way it goes. That's what it's for. That's the correct way to use it. See what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes. Are you dosing magnesium as well?
Well, I'm also dosing ATI Essentials Plus, which has magnesium. But
Okay.
that question follows on to my next question. The second most popular question I get asked about kalkwasser is, what about trace elements? And if I was being my live stream blunt self, my reply would be, what about trace elements? Because
Okay.
it's understandable, right? Because kalkwasser doesn't dose trace elements and it doesn't dose magnesium. Okay, so well, what are you doing to replace that then? But so you might find that you need to dose trace elements. Might. I
Yeah.
dose kalkwasser on my water box. I had an ICP test recently. Nothing is. I don't dose any dosing at all. It's just kalkwasser. No magnesium. No trace elements. Nothing. Just kalkwasser, and my trace element levels are fine.
Are
There's
you
nothing.
doing
There's
water change
nothing.
on that tank as well?
Water changes 10% every week because I'm a good
Yeah.
boy. And I don't dose anything else. So what about trace elements? Well, you might need to think about trace elements at some point, but probably not. And so don't start worrying about pouring in a ton of trace elements. Just start with kalkwasser to replenish your alkalinity and calcium. It will, as a nice side effect, boost your pH. If you find a year, 2 years down the line that you're losing magnesium levels, which is the uptake of magnesium is minuscule, or you're losing trace elements, then start thinking about it. But don't from day one just kalkwasser. It's fine. That's what people have been doing for years. 20 years ago, people weren't dosing kalkwasser with trace elements and with separate magnesium, messing around with all these sorts of things and trying to peg their pH up really high. They were just using kalkwasser as dosing,
Yeah.
and the side effect was it bumps your pH up, and that's what was successful. So I think my take on it is, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Use kalkwasser the way people have always used it, and if in 2 years down the line when you've been running a tank you find you need to dose trace elements, start looking at trace elements. But you don't need. It's not essential.
Okay. See, I've never used it, so that's
That
why
felt like a rant.
it was. I think to some extent, well, this has been the longest time when I've been on one of these streams where I've said nothing.
I know, it's weird.
It's
Freaking
almost
me
because
out.
I have no input. And the reason I have no input is because I've never used it. So why would I talk about something I've never used? I can't pretend to what the benefits are or how to do it because I know roughly how it works, but it's just never. I've always just dosed the balling method, and I've done it for years. So and that works for me.
Yeah.
So there's all different ways of doing it, and pick whatever works for you, basically, as far as I'm concerned.
This is very true. And balling, so I've used balling for years, and I literally used Tropic Marin balling, which is Hans Werner balling, for years. And then I graduated onto ATI, but it's the same kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's born out of the same thing. But it works. And actually, ATI Essentials Plus that I switched to from ATI Essentials Pro, that has a pH boost, quite a significant pH boost, actually. So when I switched from ATI Essentials Pro to ATI Essentials Plus, I can't remember what it was, but my pH bumped up quite significantly, a lot.
I don't track the pH. I know pH makes a difference. I know that it's the higher, within reason, the higher pH makes corals grow faster. But I already have great growth. So to some extent, it's like invasive growth where I have to give some corals away to people. And you obviously know what that's like with your Tropic Thunder Montipora. But
Oh, yeah.
so as far as I'm concerned, if the corals are all doing fine, I'm not worried about chasing a number that goes up and down. And for 15 years, I've never like paid attention to it.
I don't necessarily think you should be that obsessed with pH either. So one of the reasons that kalkwasser has been successful in the past is because it boosts pH,
Yeah.
but people weren't obsessing about it. It just does it. Now, and this is going to sound, to some people will think that this is critical because I've made so many videos about kalkwasser, but there's a good reason for that. It's good. To dose your tank as a replacement to dosing, kalkwasser is fantastic. And I can't think of many good reasons why you wouldn't dose kalkwasser to start with.
Yeah.
But and whilst I have tried also, I've played around with dosing kalkwasser over 24 hours versus just overnight and lengthening the period out a bit to try to flatten my pH graph a little bit. I'm only just trying to flatten it a little bit and here and there, and I don't really care. Like I dose it overnight because it makes my pH graph flatter.
Yeah.
But I'd have no problem if someone else said I'm dosing it over 24 hours. I'd be like, that's fine. It's not. maybe it's 10% better. It feels like it's better to have a flatter pH graph, but I don't think it's massively important. So it might seem like I obsess about that sort of thing, but I don't. It's just, you just basically just, if you dose kalkwasser, it will boost your pH up nicely, which is fantastic. But I don't like people getting too hung up on the idea that you must have pH at a certain level.
Yeah.
So calc has made my, you probably haven't watched my video from Friday, have you?
No. not from Friday, not from the Friday before, the Friday before. So.
But so calc has made my tank better. The growth has been massive, much better. And actually, I talked on the video about colours not being that much better.
Yeah.
But when I was, as I was editing the video and I was putting the before and after photos next to each other, I was like, that's a massive difference. On all, not on all corals across the board, but on some of them, the difference was huge, like night and day. And I was like, bloody hell. So it does do good things, but just it's, in my opinion, you shouldn't just be obsessed with pH and all these sorts of things. Just dose kalkwasser.
Yeah.
And when your corals, when you've got so many corals that kalkwasser can't keep up with the demand, dosing, 2-part dosing.
Yeah.
On top of it as well.
Yeah.
Anyway.
One very quick thing before we move on, and I don't know why this is. So obviously the coral farm has 2 tanks right next to each other. So and one of the things that does affect pH is the amount of carbon dioxide that's being breathed into the room and the ventilation. So obviously there's no one in there most of the day. But what I found really interesting was one of the tanks had a pH of 7.8 and the other one had it 8.4. Just normally, that was just what they were. And I thought, why is there such a massive discrepancy between the two? When I took all the pulsing xenia out that's in that big trough, the pH shot back up to exactly the same, basically, as the other one. I don't know why, but the xenia was definitely 100% doing something.
So I thought you were going to say the other way around, because if xenia was photosynthesizing so much because it grows so quickly that it boosts your pH, that makes sense. But dropping your pH,
it was definitely the other way around. And for ages, I couldn't work out what it was. And then I just thought I need to start a new xenia trough because it's about to get out of control. So I just took the whole thing out, replaced it with a brand new one, and literally within probably 24 hours, the pH was exactly the same as the other tank. And I just couldn't work out why.
That's really weird. Because some people, not many, but some people use xenia in a refugium.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
which must look awesome, but it'll escape into your display tank. But I've checked my pH when I turn my refugium off overnight and when I turn it on, and if I turn my refugium off, my pH drops, which makes sense.
Yeah.
And if I turn it on, the pH boosts up. So you would think it would be the same, but.
I agree with you. I have no idea, but it might be because it was such a large volume of coral that was being removed. I don't know what it is. All I know is there'll be 2 things that in this chat that we're going to have, which didn't make sense. One of them was that, and the other one is the one I've sent you the pictures of, which obviously you'll bring up later when we get into alkalinity.
Yes.
I'd love for people to know what happened, and I would also love for people to know. For someone to suggest why it was okay, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, we'll spend a bit of time on that because that's just in isolation, that's a dangerous photo.
I know. That's why I'm not meant to. Yeah, we'll get into context first.
But we'll get into it. Let's catch up on a few things in the chat. So, mustache. Read up on ACI methods for dosing calc. I do it an average 8.25 per day and night. Needs an apex though. And actually. If it might be that pegging your pH is possible with conventional methods, not using sodium hydroxide, and if that becomes the case in years to come, fantastic. But for now, I just think we're better off just not trying too hard.
Yeah.
Kalkwasser helps a lot if you're running a calc reactor. Yeah, calc reactors just aren't my thing. I don't really know why. Have you ever run a calc reactor? I've never had one.
No, I'm a man of routine. I like to stick with what I know.
Partly with me is because my tank isn't very big and I don't have a lot of space.
Do you know what I find interesting about your reaction to that? So you're promoting calc at the moment. You're going, this is great. There will be people out there that will say calcium reactors, that is the ultimate way of doing it. And then there's me going, look, I do I use Fornham Aaron's balling method. And I'm going, look, this is the way I do it, and it works for me. So different people can have different success with different methods, which obviously I know you know that. And there really is no one that's best, if as far as I'm concerned, or maybe
That is very true. Actually, that's a really good point. It's not that anyone is best. They all have pros and cons.
yeah,
So, for example, a calc reactor will lower your pH because the whole point is
Yeah,
you
yeah.
inject CO2 into the. I'm describing this for people who don't know. You
Oh,
inject
thanks.
it's not you CO2 into coral skeletons. It dissolves them
Yeah.
and releases the calcium and alkalinity and whatever else is in the skeleton. So that because it reduces the CO that you put CO2 in, puts CO2 into your tank. So that will lower your pH. So that's the downside
Yeah.
of a calc reactor. Plus side is it's stable as hell.
Yeah.
It's dirt cheap, and once you've dialed it in, that's it. It's easy. So that's the downside, and there's the upside. Dosing. All liquids vary, so some increase your pH, some don't. Like All for Reef doesn't.
Yeah.
ATI Essentials Plus really does. Others are up and down in between. It's very easy. It includes trace elements,
Yeah.
but it's quite expensive.
Yeah.
So there's ups and downsides. Kalkwasser, fantastic for pH, better than anything for pH. But it doesn't, and it's very, very cheap, extraordinarily cheap, and easy to do. But you'll need a big container, and it doesn't have trace or magnesium.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons of all of them, and it's not that one way is best. I actually think the best way is kalkwasser and dosing, two-part
Yeah.
dosing. But
Very
there's pros.
diplomatic because I'm
But
here.
there's pros and there's pros. Well, no, that's what I do, and that's what I've done
Yeah,
for
yeah.
a while. But that's there are pros and cons of that. And I'm not saying calc reactors are bad. A lot of people. So it's funny. I've never used a calc reactor, so I don't know. But people seem to have extreme. It's like Marmite. People either think calc reactors are awful, or they're absolutely amazing.
But why? What makes why would some people think they're awful?
Bad experiences, maybe. A lot of the people who say they're amazing are people who've been running them. They just dial in and they just work.
Yeah.
And you get crazy growth. But I don't know. But
See, even though you already know this, but some people might not know this. I misread the instructions when I first started, and I poured the calc straight into the tank. And that is not what you're meant to do. Basically, I am, you know, I'm dyslexic, so I didn't read things properly. I'm both dyslexic and lazy when it comes to instructions. And I didn't read it properly, and I just put it straight into the tank. And it wasn't a huge amount, but the tank went white, and it did not go well. So,
so I made the opposite mistake because I didn't read the instructions properly. I read them, but I just didn't read them properly.
Yeah.
And I was mixing 3 grams per gallon, and it turns out you're supposed to do 6 grams. So I was pouring in, and it wasn't having much effect on my pH. I was like, this is a bit crap.
Yeah.
And then I realised that I was dosing half the level. So I was dosing, but it could quite as easily have been the other way around.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but anyway, John Wright says, doesn't pH drop at night in the ocean? Do you know what? I've got a feeling it doesn't. You can make an argument if you're just looking at this logically. You can make an argument either way as to whether it does or not. But I think I looked this up and I think it doesn't drop. I think it's steady at 8.3 or 8.2. This is the thing for my calc video on Friday. I was researching ocean acidification and trying to work out what the pH of oceans is. But it's not. You would think that would be one of the top things, but the average pH of the ocean, and from what I can make out, this was across the planet, was 8.2.
yeah.
But everybody talks about in context of a reef it being 8.3, and that has dropped over the years. But I couldn't find anywhere that says the Great Barrier Reef is 8.3, Raja Ampat is 8.28 or whatever. I couldn't find it. But anyway, I don't know if it drops overnight or not. I don't think it does. But the one thing with that is, there are times when you do want to mimic the ocean,
Yeah.
and there are other times when you don't.
Yeah. Alkalinity is one of them because the alkalinity of the ocean, I think, is 7.8, and it's I
It's
think
lower. I think it's like
lower.
6 or something, isn't it?
Is it? I
Yeah.
always thought it was 7.8 for some reason, but you can have a quick Google to tell me I'm wrong now, aren't you? But
Yeah. Well, I'm interested. I don't.
No,
The thing is, though,
the reason that
scientists.
oh, sorry. I'll
No,
let you
go on.
go. No, I was going to say the reason that we have it higher is it gives us a buffer for when it goes wrong, if you see what I mean. And that's why people have settled sort of around 8.2 to 8.6 probably. Did you find it?
No, and this is the trouble with scientists is they don't think about our coral tanks. So
Yeah,
they talk about different things.
yeah, yeah,
But I'm sure it's lower. I think it's at the lower end. It's 7 or maybe even 6.5 or something. I don't know.
yeah.
Anyway, so let's have a look at some other stuff. Is dosing and testing easier with an aquarium that has a sump? No,
But
makes
your
no difference.
one of those lady things has come on. Oh, someone's deleting them, I think. So it's fine.
Les is on it, good man.
Yeah,
No, so dosing it's tidier in a sump because you can put all your dosing tubes out of the way in the sump.
yeah,
And I suppose no, actually, it's no easier. It's no easier or more difficult. It's just basically sumps give you more options because you've got more space to put more filters or whatever, and they're a messy spot that you can put all sorts of stuff that you don't want on display, your heater, your skimmer, and it makes everything tidy. But
yeah.
it won't make. But you can dose just as easily. So this is an all-in-one tank, although it's got the filtration chamber. I don't dose on that yet. I tested my out the other day. I don't need to, but when I do, I'll be dosing in that. That's fine, no problem.
Yeah. So
Um,
everyone's saying in the chat that it's the Ocean 7. So there you go. They all know.
I even think it's lower than that, to be fair, but who knows?
You reckon it's 3.6?
3.6. It is not, but we will come on to that. I'm going to catch up with the chat because there's a few comments that I think are worth talking about. I have a Fluval Evo 13.5 and I want to do mixed reef. Do I need to dose or can I just do water changes every week? You will probably, the real answer is, so I've got, I think, 3 corals in this tank and I tested my alkalinity for the first time in about 3 months the other day. Don't tell anyone.
3
That's
months.
bad. I know. But I've put 2 tiny little frags in and I figured I do 10% water change every week. I figured it was unlikely to be a problem.
Yeah.
But that's not what you should do. That's because I've got a million tanks and a YouTube channel and a job and a missus and all this sort of stuff. So I get lazy with some things. But I don't need to dose on this at the moment. I will need to dose soon because I'll start buying more corals. And you might be able to get away with just water changes for quite a while, actually. But the answer is test every week. Test once a week your alkalinity. Don't worry about testing calcium and magnesium. You probably should do that, but if you just want to do the minimum, this is what I'd do. Just test alkalinity. Actually, the better advice is test calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium once a week and see where it goes. But the reality is that if you're just testing alkalinity once a week, if it's dropping week on week, then you need to dose. If it's not dropping, you don't need to dose.
I think that question also it depends on what you're planning to put in it. If you're planning to put one coral in it, I suppose not a mixed reef if it's one coral. But if you're planning to put hardly any coral in it, you need to do less work. If you want to absolutely completely pack it, then you will need to dose it, because I don't think the changes will keep up with if it's completely packed with coral.
Well, so it's not just coral. So he's talking mixed reef. So he's obviously talking about he's got soft corals in mind as well as LPS. Presumably not SPS. I wouldn't put SPS in that, and I'm reasonably good at keeping SPS. But one thing with, even if you're keeping soft corals, if you've got snails, what's a snail shell made of? Calcium carbonate.
Yeah, there you go.
Coral skeletons.
Yeah.
What's coralline made of? Calcium carbonate.
Yeah.
So everything, there are lots of things in a reef tank, not just corals, that uptake calcium and alkalinity. You might still be able to get away with dosing with just water changes, to be fair. But it's probably better. It's usually better to dose. So the best thing to do, what you're asking, Archies, is you're asking us to tell you what's likely to happen. But the best answer really, and this is a less helpful answer, but the best answer really is to test once a week.
And then it will tell you from the results.
Exactly. Because we can guess what might happen, but if you test every week, then you'll know. And actually, there are some freaky stuff happens in tanks. There's a guy I know who had a tank with basically not many corals in it, relatively new, and his alkalinity, he wasn't dosing anything. His alkalinity kept going up and up and up. And he was like, what the hell's going on here? And it turned out it was his sand. His sand was leaching.
Dissolving.
No, I don't know what was going on. I don't think it was dissolving. But
I had an issue with the Red Sea tank where the sand was turning solid. So it basically something was happening which was dissolving the sand together. It was like melting it all together. And I've also had it where hermit crabs shells have got holes in them. So might have had the hermit crab for a couple of years, and all of a sudden it's developed a hole where the shell has melted, and I think that must be to do with low pH because it's like it's that's what's dissolving. I potentially same as a calc reactor. I assume. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
I wouldn't have thought you'd have to be pretty low to do that, but because I have a couple of dead conches, I say dead conches,
Yeah.
conch shells in my
Yes.
tank,
Yeah.
and I never pull a conch out because sometimes they stay still for days,
Yeah.
and you think they're dead, and then like they're so I don't pull them out. But this one it's been dead for a long time, but the shell has started, like a hole has appeared in it,
Yeah.
so
Yes,
it
that's
just
what I
feels like
mean.
it's
But
rotting.
why is
Yeah.
there a hole in it? Because I'm
It
talking
won't
about
be low
exactly the same
pH.
thing. It was a
'Cause
conch shell.
Yeah. Oh, it was conch. I don't know. I don't know what it is. It might be just bacteria eating it. I don't know, but it won't be low pH.
Okay.
I wouldn't have thought.
It was just a guess. I don't know.
Maybe whilst it's because obviously whilst it's alive, it must be replenishing and it must need that for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Oh, carbon, activated carbon or carbon dosing. Oh yeah, activated carbon.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's yeah. So you're asking, is it going to absorb your trace elements? Probably will absorb a small portion of it, but I wouldn't worry about it in the slightest. In the slightest. Activated carbon. Really, what you should do with activated carbon is once a month, put it in your tank. After a week at most, maybe a few days, I find it 2 or 3 days max, it stops working. Whip it
Yeah.
out, throw it in the bin, and then put some new stuff in the next month. Then you don't even have to worry about this. But that's overkill for me. I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Yeah. Something that I found actually, I think two or maybe even three times of people filling a whole reactor full of carbon, which is not advised as far as I'm concerned. You should use a small amount
Oh God,
incrementally
yeah, I see.
rather than put in a huge amount throughout the whole reactor and hope you only have to do it every like 6 months. So that's not how you use carbon. I think carbon is actually best in a bag as well. That I believe that's correct.
Do you know what I've tried in a bag passively, just in a sump somewhere, and in a reactor,
Yeah.
not overloading it, and the only difference is it clears your water much quicker in a reactor. So within an hour, it's like wow, whereas it might take a couple of hours in a bag. So, but that's the only difference. I don't notice it lasting much longer, or
Does
making
it
it
not grind
clearer.
all together when it's in a reactor?
It maybe it does, not that I can see, but it's the reactors I've used are really low flow, but it might do. But the theory is that it can grind up and release fines that harm your fish.
Yeah.
I've not noticed that in my fish, but I think it would have to be pretty bad. All right. Well, I was going to try to catch up with the chat, but there's too many messages, so I'll pull out a couple. But let's get back on topic.
Yes.
So the other comment from Push Button Reef on the member section was about the subject for today, and that was they say you should not chase numbers when looking after parameters. So what is the correct amount of time that moves you from quick fix numbers chaser to Zen God, happy slow parameter God? And this is really what this is about tonight. So we're just going to go through all the parameters and talk about should you chase number, what we do really.
Yeah.
And should you be really worried about certain numbers and should you not? And I'm going to start with the ones that are very boring, but are very, very important. First off, what's the most important parameter in a reef tank, Ryan?
As far as I'm concerned, it's alkalinity. But I'm not sure. I'm now nervous. You're going to like tell.
Close, but
salinity.
that's the wrong
Salinity
answer.
is what you
No,
like.
I have to take your first answer.
No, salinity, because if salinity's wrong, everything's wrong, basically.
Exactly right. And so this is salinity is just essential. You probably don't need to worry about it, especially if you're doing water changes. It's not going to change.
Yeah.
But you should still check it periodically. But it's just so important. And if your salinity is too high or too low, you're pissing in the wind, frankly, with everything else.
Yeah.
You must get your salinity right. So it's just so important. And it will harm your corals if your salinity is too high or too low. So salinity is number one. But the reason I say it's boring is because most people's tanks, it just stays stable.
Yeah.
The only reason I think is worth mentioning is because if you've got a problem in your tank, the first thing you should check is salinity.
See, in my tank, it doesn't stay stable because obviously I'm taking loads of water
you
out
take
all the
stuff out all
time when I
day,
ship the corals, and then I'm not putting new. I just let the RO to top it up, and then I'll adjust it incrementally once a week if needed. The only thing I will say is that Salinity, as I've said to you before, is a pain in the ass to test accurately because the things that test Salinity seem to lose calibration constantly. And although Hannah is, I'm not sponsored by Hannah. Of everything, I found that Hannah's are the best one because you can calibrate it just before you use it, and it takes like 30 seconds.
Right. Okay. So even because you use the GHL salinity probe.
Oh, my GHL Salinity probe is way out at the moment. It's saying it's like 1.023 or something, whereas on the Hannah one, which I've just calibrated, is 1.026.
Yeah.
So,
So I've got a refractory salinity probe,
yeah.
and I've started to not like it because I must have had it 6 months, and it turns out all salinity probes are just a bit of a pain in the ass. I
It works.
calibrated it today.
Calibrate them. If you don't calibrate them, they don't work.
So that's the thing. You've got to calibrate them regularly. And this one, it's just been drifting slightly. I don't care because I know my salinity's not off. But I just thought today, you know what, I'll calibrate it. I went to calibrate it
Yeah.
with 35 parts per thousand or 1.026. And it set, and as soon as I calibrated it, it started reading the salinity calibration fluid as 1.0265. And I was like, I've just told you that's 1.026.
Yeah.
What are you
Yeah.
doing? But all salinity probes, like the Apex one, is the same. It drives them crazy trying to get it right and all that, and you've just got to calibrate them regularly. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so salinity number one. Number two, you're wrong. It's not alkalinity.
Well, what is it then?
Temperature.
Temperature.
There we go.
So,
Another really boring one.
Yeah.
Actually, temperature is worth talking about a little bit for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it should just be a set and forget.
Yeah,
for
I
the
was
most
going to
part.
say, you set them on day one, and then as long as the heater doesn't break, it should be the same permanently.
But the reason that it's worth talking about a little bit more is because it's the sort of thing that once you've been in the hobby for a year or so and you've kind of figured out the basics,
Yeah.
you start to look for more advanced stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you'll stumble across someone who's like, oh, did you know if you run higher temperature levels,
Yeah.
your corals will grow faster? And you're
Yeah.
like, ooh, I like that. And so you start pissing around with the temperature.
Yes.
And the reality is just don't do it. It's not, if turning your temperature up a degree isn't going to double your growth. If it will increase your growth, it might do it slightly, but it'll cause other problems, and it's just not worth messing around. And that's why. So your reaction is the correct reaction is
Yeah.
25 degrees. Yeah, that's it. I never touch it.
What is your set to?
So I have 3 tanks. They're all set to different temperatures.
Okay.
My main tank, Aquapora dominated, is 25 degrees centigrade, which is
Yeah.
77, 78 Fahrenheit. These two, the LPS tanks, oh well, this one and the other one are 24 and 24 and a half.
Interesting. See, I've known people that run them at 24.
Yeah.
The coral farms run at 25.5 because at the very beginning, when I was setting up the farm, I went onto YouTube and I went to everyone, Worldwide Corals. I think Pirates Reef is one of them, BRS, and I basically took all the parameters I could find of everyone and then took an average of them, and the average came out at 25.5, and that's why I just run it at that. But I do know people run them at 24 and 26.
So that I did run, and I'll prove that I'm not just getting it wrong. 25 degrees, that's my current temperature. And I did used to run it higher. Because, and I still, in the summer, I do turn it up because it's going to increase anyway. So I just try to reduce the swing a bit. But the rest of the year, I run it at 25 degrees, and I just leave it that now. I don't want to change it. The reason I run the LPS tanks cooler is because LPS can take cooler temperatures that come from deep waters, and it saves a bit of electricity.
Yeah.
Well, I tried to keep all the tanks relatively close because some corals are going to go between each tank, and it's better to have the parameters roughly the same. But yeah, if I was going to set up an LPS tank, I'd have it cooler than an SPS, is really what I'm getting at.
It's interesting that you said that you put your temperature up in the summer because almost everyone, including me, would see that as counterproductive. Although I understand why you do it because it reduces the swing. Well, everyone else
have to
do
worry.
is shutting it down.
You don't have to worry because you've got perfect air conditioning and temperature control.
That was amazing. The air conditioning. Obviously, you saw in the video, like there was no heaters on any of those tanks for at least 24 hours. Temperature exactly the same the whole time, 25.5 or around that.
So good, isn't it?
Yeah. So that was one of the best pieces of redundancy that I got basically.
Yeah. nice and easy. But the reason I turn it up, and it is counterintuitive, but the water, so if I have it at 25 degrees, in the summer in the UK when it gets hot for like 3 days, well, actually this summer was particularly bad, last summer was quite hot as well.
Yeah.
Temperature sits at 25 degrees. Every day it goes up to about 27, and then by the night it goes back down to 25, and then back up to 27 during the day, back down to 25. So I put it up to 26, so it's not got the swing so much.
Do you know what the highest temperature you've ever had has been? Do you remember?
Yeah, so it was a couple of years ago. It was about 28.2, something like that. It was getting to the point where I was thinking, if this goes another degree higher, I'm in serious trouble.
Yeah, mine was 28.9 was the highest it's ever gone. And that was when
Did you lose anything?
I'll be honest with you, I don't remember.
No.
But it was a long time ago. I remember freezing bottles of RO water and just doing everything I could to try and cool the tank down. Because obviously if you freeze the bottle, and obviously if it melts, if the bottle comes open, you want it RO water and not tap water just in case.
Yeah, true.
It was a big enough tank that it didn't matter.
No, what I found this summer is the first time I've nailed keeping it cool. I just
with your Ted Baker box stuck to
Ted
your
Baker
window.
box. First off, like block all the sun coming in the first place. But the main thing is just getting a big fan. I've always had the little hobby grade fans, and they are actually quite good considering.
Yeah.
But if you get a massive like house fan like this, that's the way. And it's so effective. So that's what I do now, and I blinds shut and all that. Anyway, temperature boring again, but just 25 degrees.
Yeah.
That's it. End of conversation, basically. You happy with that? What's your temperature?
25.5.
25.5, you said. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's the number one and two, but a bit boring. You then talked about your most important one.
Alkalinity is the one that, for me, which I find most important because it's the one that fluctuates
Why is that?
most. Because it's the one that fluctuates the most. So it's the one I try.
Is that because you remove water from your systems every day? Why is that?
I think I have such a large amount of coral. And obviously when you put, when I get a box of corals or 2 boxes or 3 boxes of coral, most people will get 1 coral at a time and they place it in their tank, or maximum of 10 corals like frags. I'm getting sometimes 20 or 30 colonies and putting them in the tank. And then all of a sudden you start to notice that the alkalinity starts dropping quite rapidly when you get like a new shipment of corals come in.
Yeah.
And the other thing is obviously all the time that corals are going out as well, your alkalinity consumption is reduced. So if I'm doing really well and selling loads of corals, then it goes down. Right. And sometimes I just have a big cull of corals. And there's a very good customer of mine, and he has a absolutely insanely large tank where you have to get in with a wetsuit. And I'll go, look, I've got this massive colony of hystrix. So it's like this big. I said, just come pick it up and take it away. And he'll come take it. He takes it for free. But as I said, he is a good customer of mine. He spends a lot of money. So, and when I take out that big hystrix colony, all of a sudden, because he might take 3 or 4 or 5 colonies at a time, there's a significant reduction in alkalinity consumption. So I have to keep an eye on it quite closely.
What does that? Have you noticed harm coming to yours? Because I've done the same thing. I've removed lots of corals at one time, and my alkalinity has swung by 1 DKH in a day.
Yeah.
What have you? What sort of swing have you got when you do that? And what effect does it have? Any effect?
It doesn't have any effect, but if obviously because I'm dosing a certain amount, and if all of a sudden I've taken out a load of corals, I'll notice over the course of a week the alkalinity will have crept up. Maybe even it's just 1 DKH. But if I don't test for 2 weeks, all of a sudden it's 2 DKH, if you see what I mean. So
it's not like you have a sudden bump in your alkalinity and you lose half the corals.
The only thing that does that I've noticed a significant impact on alkalinity is reducing phosphate. When you reduce phosphate, the alkalinity consumption goes through the roof. If you've got very high phosphate, and for a period of time. So when I went to Spain recently, and someone else was feeding the fish, and they basically used the entire tub of fish food, and they shouldn't have done. And so I came back and I had very high phosphate on one of these systems, or well, to some extent, both these systems were higher. So I gradually, over a period of time, I brought it down, but I wasn't paying close enough attention to the alkalinity. And then when I tested it a week later, I was like, bloody hell, this has dropped significantly because I've reduced the alkalinity so much. No, because I've reduced the phosphate so much.
Yeah.
So phosphate basically inhibits calcification, I believe. This is where someone's going to like hammer me in the comments section, but I think that's correct. And that's why it makes a difference. Because
Correct. Yeah.
yeah. So
That is right. But so we'll come on to your experience with alkalinity dropping in a sec. But I wanted to talk about. I'm going to show you. Let me bring up my my screen, share screen. Can I do this? So add to dynamic. Can I do this? So this is the main one. I don't know. I can't. All right, never mind. In fact, yeah, I can. Look at that. All right. So this is my current. My current alkalinity level. The first thing I wanted to talk about was anybody's got a KH keeper. You'll see here it says my pH is 6.99. That is obviously wrong. If my pH was 7, I'd have problems. But it does this from time to time. What I find is a bit of goop builds up on the pH probe, and when you clean the goop off, suddenly it starts reading the pH correctly again. But weirdly, it doesn't affect the KH result. So if I were to clean that pH probe, test the alkalinity again, I bet it would come back more or less 7.96 again. Anyway, that's it. I'll show you what mine fluctuates by. In fact, let's do the graph.
I'd be interested
So
if you got a HANA checker now. I'm not going to ask you to do it, but if you got a HANA checker now and tested it, if it would be 7.96, because I find it notoriously unreliable.
I reckon it would be definitely within 1 DKH, probably within half.
Yeah. Interesting.
But I don't. To be honest, if it says it's 8 and it's actually 8.5, I don't really care.
No, I know.
As long as it's as long as it's stable. But anyway, so this is my alkalinity graph, right? And it fluctuates from a trough of 7.79, peak of 8.2. That's actually higher than I'd like, if I'm honest. In an ideal world, I would have that. Let's just get rid of that. I would have that. So it was a bit flatter. But I've had a fluctuating level of that kind of level. Bit higher, almost 1 DKH a day for quite a while, and I haven't noticed any ill effects. I'm not saying that it doesn't cause problems.
Yeah.
And people often say it shouldn't be more than half a DKH a day.
Yeah.
But I've regularly had it above half a DKH a day swing, and I have corals in my tank that aren't doing very well, just from time to time, just because for reasons I can't figure out. Maybe that's it, but I don't think so. I've never got the impression that alkalinity swings cause major problems.
Yeah.
And you have an extreme example of.
Yeah, but it was a very, very slow alkalinity swing, and you don't know.
Well, yeah.
You don't know the end of the story yet.
Oh, really?
I'll give you a little sneak preview. It's not a good end to the story.
Tell me when you want the picture.
You can put the picture up now if you want, but
Okay.
It's right. So basically, this is my 1,000 litre tank, or this was my 1,000 litre tank, which I had for probably 7 years, I reckon. And during COVID, so the tank was at my parents' house, and during COVID, my parents said basically, because my father was a high risk category, they said you cannot come here to look after the tank anymore. We don't want it. And I had the coral farm set up. So what I did is I cut all the corals off, left most of the fish in the tank, moved all the corals into the coral farm, in basically 1 day or pretty quickly, and then left the tank just to run with the fish in it. I turned off all the dosing, and what you can see there, that little coral, is basically the base of the coral, which was on the rock. So I'd cut it and left the rock in there, and the coral over the next 2 or 3 months grew back. But because there was no dosing, because there was no corals in there, the alkalinity and calcium, everything fell. And then when I got back after a few months, I tested that, and it came at 3.2. Now, I tested that not just with the HANA checker, but also a Salifert checker, like just the reagent one. And what I will say is the coral looked better in that tank than it looked in the coral farm, when it was obviously brand new and it was all stable. I have no idea why it did that. The colors on it looked amazing, like in comparison to the rest of the colony. But the end of the story was that I thought, as an experiment, when I went back to get the fish and shut it down properly, I took those small pieces of coral and I put them in the coral farm just to see what would happen, and they died instantly. Within
Really?
within 24 hours, they were dead. And the
So
reason,
that was the shock going from 3 to 8 DKH. Or whatever.
yes, yes.
Right.
So it was obviously a big. So don't go for that swing. But the thing I found most interesting was like, how are they still alive? Like, how are they alive at 3.2?
Because the thing, so alkalinity, and this is, I don't understand the science of. Go on, try and get ready. You. I don't understand the science of alkalinity. If you look up the definition of what alkalinity is, it's complicated and it's about all sorts of. It's not like calcium is one thing. It's calcium.
Yeah.
Alkalinity is all of these different ions, and I don't understand it.
Yeah.
But because it's so complicated and because there's so much going on, if you've got alkalinity of 3.2, whoa, everything's all over the place.
Yeah.
So it's so surprising that it can. The fact that it drifts down very, very slowly is why that wasn't a problem.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
But nonetheless, I would like you. If I saw three alkalinity in my tank, I would expect everything to be dead.
That's what I was
And
going to say. If I had said to you, "Oh, by the way, I tested my alkalinity on my 1,000 litre tank," you'd go, "Everything's dead," and I'll go, "Look how amazing they look."
But this is this is not the first person I've heard say that. I've heard loads of people say, "I'll drop to 4 to 5, whatever, no problems. Just bring it back up slowly."
That's the thing, and this is what people do, and I'm guilty of this myself. Or let's say your dosing pump stops working, and all of a sudden your alkalinity has dropped. And let's say you wanted to keep it at 9, hypothetically speaking, it's dropped down to 7. What people immediately do is they go, "How quickly can I get it back to 9?" And they pour in sodium bicarbonate to get it back up, and then 2 days later it's back at 9, and all of a sudden the corals start to die, and it's because there's no rush to get things back to the level they need. If the corals aren't dying, do it a very small incremental amount every day. It's us being lazy basically, because if we can get it up in 2 days, we can stop thinking about it then, can't we? Rather than taking 2 weeks to get it back up.
That's the thing, is you can stop thinking about it, because
Yes.
I've done that before as well. I'm like, oh, I want to get it back because then it's it's off my mind. But that's because it's easier for us rather than better for the corals.
Yeah. But what I find interesting is that I have also run that a long time ago. So I've done all sorts of experiments with corals and growth and stuff like that, and that 1,000 litre tank was once run at 12. It was permanently run with a DKH of 12. So I don't do that anymore, but it definitely does give you a boost of growth, providing you're providing high nutrients and high alkalinity. The problem is, and also high calcium and magnesium. Sometimes people will hear a small snippet of information and they'll go, "Oh, alkalinity 12 increases your growth," but without knowing that it's a balance and everything else needs to be higher too.
That's the same thing as the temperature. You might hear, oh, higher temperature, higher alkalinity. That's worth a crack.
Yeah.
But you're playing with fire basically, aren't you? So
Yeah. And what I think is if your corals are alive, unless you're like really, really at the next level where you want to start experimenting, knowing you might cause some damage, just be happy with just normal parameters, because that's what I run the farm on. Just normal, nothing special, just normal.
that, and in terms of alkalinity, then, so and we'll move on to other stuff in a minute. But alkalinity is worth talking about at length, I think.
Yeah.
So if you ask me what's the best, do you know what I'm going to ask you? What's the best alkalinity level?
Mine's is usually kept between 8.2 and 8.4. Is where
That's not the question I asked.
I
What is
don't
the
know.
best
Well,
alkalinity
it
level?
depends. Like in theory, natural seawater level is the best for the corals, but that's not the best for us because it doesn't allow a buffer when things go wrong. But and why is this like a trick question?
It's not a trick question. I'm just looking smug, aren't I?
As far as I'm concerned, I always run mine between 8.2 and 8.4. Usually, it fluctuates a little bit, maybe a bit higher than that. Maybe it would be very rare for it to be lower than that, but usually between that.
Okay, so there's no right answer. Basically, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't matter.
Yeah, just not 3.6.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wouldn't want to run it that low, but like I run it at around 8. Someone asked me today actually. I run it at around 8. Was it 8, 7.9, something like that?
I
I
asked you
run it.
yesterday. But some might have asked you today, but
I
I
did you? Yeah,
called
yeah.
you, didn't I, and asked you yesterday,
I
didn't I?
sold a car to someone today. I think it was him. But anyway, but so 8. Here we go. We've got an answer. 7.8 exactly.
Mm,
But
yeah,
and was that? I think that might be what I had it at, which is maybe he's pulling my leg. Anyway, I run it at around 8, but just because I do like to have a rough buffer, because if actually it turns out my KH keeper is 1 DKH out, not half,
yeah,
then that could easily be 7. And then if it got down to 7, I'm not that bothered. But actually, the true position is 6, and I'd rather it just be somewhere in the middle to allow for a margin for error and the
yeah,
buffer zone as well. But I don't keep it at 8 because it's better growth or better coloration. And I've never done an experiment where I take photos before and after,
yeah,
but I would be surprised if you run your 3 tanks exactly the same. One is 7 DKH, one is 8, and one is 9. There's not going to be any difference,
yeah, yeah.
or no noticeable difference. It doesn't, basically, as far as I can work out, it doesn't really matter what level it is. And this is the classic, the number isn't important, it's stability. And
Yeah.
that's especially, I don't think that's the case with everything, but it absolutely is with alkalinity, in my opinion. My
And the
experience.
tanks usually find their own level by themselves. They go, this is where we're sort of happy. Well, like to some extent, if you see, you understand what I'm trying to say. I know,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah, yeah.
if you increase your dosing, it will go up. But usually, you'll get to a level and you'll go, yeah, it seems to be stable at that level, and then you just don't touch it anymore.
Yeah. Someone asked earlier, and I can't find the comment. I went looking for it. Someone asked earlier if you dose alkalinity, will it decrease your pH? And actually, it should be the other way around. So most things like Ulva Reef don't increase your
Yeah,
pH, but many dosing solutions do increase your pH. So actually, the more you dose, the more your pH should go up. And if you're dosing more, the chances are you've got more corals doing more photosynthesis, so your pH should go up. But okay, I think that's probably everything on alkalinity. Fairly simple, right?
fairly.
You know, it just
Everything's simple when you already know it. That's the thing for us.
but no, this is so. The other day, someone asked me about going into really getting into the weeds and going on to like an expert level conversation on the live stream, and I think it would be worth doing that. But I thought about it, and I was like, part of the reason I don't do that is because I like it to be like a more accessible stream,
Yeah,
but also because the most important part is the basics. So I would give the same advice to someone who wants to keep an aquapora dominated tank as I would to someone who's just set up their first tank. And the most important things are the most simple things. And so we've talked so far. Salinity is really important. Temperature, just 25, that's fine, leave it. Alkalinity, 7, 8, 9, whatever you want, just leave it.
yeah.
That's it. But it should be that's it. But it is as simple as that. And you can go looking for things to say, oh, this should be a bit higher to increase growth or whatever, but it's not gonna be the be all and end all.
If you're trying to adjust your parameters, are there certain parameters that you adjust first to get so you get them in line? Because there is something I do. I'm just interested to see if you do the same. What do you do to get?
As in calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium.
Yes.
So there is an order in which you're supposed to do it
Yes.
because one precipitates the other. I can't remember what it is, but I've never, or if I have, it's been a long time since I've
Yeah.
tried to do that. So I couldn't tell you.
I'm pretty sure
What's
you're
the
meant to
order?
get magnesium, then calcium, and then alkalinity done
That sounds right.
correctly. That's what. Yeah, I'm the same as you. You do it you do it once years ago, and then you don't think about it again, do you? But I'm
Exactly.
pretty
So
sure.
you
I just
forget.
think that's useful information because if people are trying to get their alkalinity up but their magnesium's like through the floor, it's you have to get the magnesium right first.
Interesting. And doesn't magnesium buffer the rest of your parameters or something? There's some science reason behind
I
that.
believe that it stops calcium and alkalinity from
That sounds
combining, I
right.
believe is what it does.
Okay, fair
We
enough.
never claim to be experts, people. We just wing it.
But and the other thing is that's the other thing I thought about is often we'll be like, oh, I don't know, and like it's not because we don't know what we're talking about.
It's because we don't want to get sued.
Well, no, it's because it doesn't matter. Because
Yeah,
like if you ask me to explain what alkalinity is,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah.
All I know is it comes in a bottle. I pour it in where my corals grow, and it makes it everything okay.
Yeah.
So you don't need to know. There's some things you do need to know, but a lot of things you don't. There's a comment I've seen. Precise science. You've posted this a couple of times. I think you're trying to get my attention. Hey guys, do you know about the C-Lab NO28 dosing blocks?
Never heard of it.
Me neither. Dosing blocks. I don't like the sound of a dosing block, as in you put it in and it increases, it like doses calcium and alkalinity.
I'm going to Google it.
C-Lab NO28.
Just,
C-Lab
just
number
chill
20.
for a second.
I will fill. There was another question. I think actually this was dedicated reefer. Was it you who was asking about pH and KH? It must have been. Yeah. The question I asked I couldn't find. My reason for asking is that is my pH is consistently at 8.5. That's quite high, and my alk hovers around 7.8, and I'd like to lower my pH to 8.2. I personally wouldn't be too worried about doing that, chasing a perfect number of pH. But no, so if you there is a relationship between alkalinity and pH, and Senai were trying to bring out a KH monitor that worked on an algorithm and the pH reading, but they never released it. I don't know why, but I've noticed before that when my pH has been up or down, my alkalinity hasn't changed. I'm sure something does happen, but I don't think it's like if your pH goes up, your KH goes down. So, but if you're worried about your pH being too high, 8.5 is all right to me. You dose something that doesn't. You'll be doing something that's increasing your pH. That's an unnaturally high level. On most tanks, it won't be 8.5. So whatever you're doing, if you've got a CO2 scrubber, take it offline. If you're dosing kalkwasser, dose less or stop dosing it. If you're dosing a high pH solution like ATI Essentials Plus, dose ATI Essentials Pro instead, or Alpha Reef, which is a lower pH solution. But I personally with pH 8.5, it's probably a little bit high, but I wouldn't be sweating about it as much as anything. I wouldn't be sure that your probe is 100% accurate.
I found out what those things are. Although this is only from like 5 seconds of research.
Yeah.
They appear to be some sort of block that it says restores and maintains concentrations of calcium, strontium, and all trace elements at the same level automatically and cannot be overdosed.
Bollocks.
They say it's dissolve only to replace depleted elements. It just.
I mean,
it
that sounds amazing, and I would love that. But come on, that's too good to be true, surely.
I don't know. That's what I'm just telling you. That's what I've just read. But and then the thing afterwards says this is ludicrous.
Yeah, exactly.
What someone's commented. So I don't know.
Well, yeah. So it's for sale on eBay. There's just that's bollocks. I would never use that. That sounds like bollocks. No way. I don't believe it for a second.
There's the blunt Alex we know and love.
I know, yeah. But it is. It's like there's no way you can how would that work? That you get a little block, you put it in, and it maintains the perfect levels. No.
Don't know.
And when you Google it, it comes up with a Reef Builders article from 2012.
Yeah.
And someone says, anybody still use these? So it's been around for years. If this was a miracle product, everybody would be using it.
Yeah.
It's like, what I would like is a probe that you just put in your tank and it tells you every parameter.
Nice.
And you don't have to calibrate it.
Nice.
But if
doses.
Yeah, I'll be up for that as well. If someone sold me that for £1,000, do you know what? I'd say that's probably not going to be true. It's not.
I would pay 5,000 probably for that, because if it actually genuinely worked.
But that's it. If someone brought it to market for £1,000, it's not going to work. It would probably cost £1 million.
I'll be the first person to fund it.
Yeah, well, there you go. I'm going to start this on Kickstarter and just rinse you for a load of cash in that case, and then disappear.
It's because it's impossible. It would be so good, especially for me. It would save so much time on testing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't save time. I'd just test, because I don't tend to test. It's so bad at that. Anyway, so what else was I going to say? Right, good stuff. So we can move on from whatever we were talking about before, which I've forgotten because I've got a bad memory.
The other ones are less interesting. Like in terms of, they're not as much to talk about. So calcium, for example. What would you like to say about calcium?
Calcium. I tested calcium once.
Once you okay, yeah,
Yeah, it was all right.
yeah. Yeah, I test mine
Next.
once a week. So
Do you?
yeah, yeah.
You
I
dwarf.
test calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium once a week. It's so weird that the magnesium on the coral farm, like I dosed like hundreds of milliliters of alkalinity every day. I think the magnesium is like 2 mil a day. That's it. That's all I need to do. It's insane on such a large system that it has to be such a small amount, but it never drops.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's people often wonder about magnesium, but the
Yeah.
uptake is so small.
Yeah.
It's basically a trace element. It's not, but it kind of is. Okay, so I'll show you my results. So I think this is for my ICP test. It must be because I've not put these in. That's cool. It brings through. Oh, it does. So the Reef Factory dashboard, when you do an ICP test, it pulls in all your results here. Love that. Anyway, so my calcium is.
Phosphate. Bloody hell.
I know, yeah, it's bad. Don't read that. No, don't read that. No. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. Yeah, my phosphate's always high. But yeah, so my calcium is 450, which I think is actually probably a notch high, but whatever.
Yeah. For that alkalinity level, it is a slightly higher. You would want your alkalinity to be higher for that sort of calcium level. I think if you have it at 12, it's meant to be 460. I think. So yours is higher than it needs to be.
I don't care because I'm hard.
You're like, I don't care what you say, Ryan.
No, it's not what you. It's not. I don't care what you say. It's just that this is so calcium and magnesium are numbers I don't chase because they tend to, in my experience anyway, and this might be different for other people. It might be different in different tanks. Maybe it's because the dosing solutions I use, kalkwasser is a balanced solution that doses calcium and alkalinity equally. ATI Essentials is the same in theory, at least. Whether it's that it fluctuates in reality is different. But in theory, the stuff I dose is balanced. So if my alkalinity is right, my calcium should be right.
Yeah, in theory, yeah. And I think Oh, Eric's just commented saying, "Does it really matter?" I'm assuming it's about the balance between calcium and alkalinity. The honest answer is I don't know if it matters, but there is a calculator on Ultimate Reef that specifically is for what your calcium level should be compared to what your alkalinity level should be. There must be some optimum ratio between the two of them. But
maybe. That's the sort of thing I don't care about. Sorry, say again.
No, I was going to say those sorts of things about having the correct ratio might be for the people that want to get the extra 10% out of their tanks, whereas most people just want them to survive.
Yeah, and the question, the follow-up is a good question. Does it matter if it's 420 or 460? I can't tell you because I don't monitor my calcium closely enough. You do though. The only time I test calcium is when I do an ICP test.
Yeah. Really?
What's the answer, Ryan? Yeah.
Well, that's what I was saying. It's probably for those people that want to get an extra 10% out of their tank. It's like if let's put it this way: if you're running your alkalinity at 12 and your calcium is at 420, it does make a difference.
Okay, I see.
Whereas if you're running your alkalinity at 7 and your calcium, or sorry, 8 and your calcium is 460, maybe it doesn't make a difference that way round.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense.
And stuff like that. If you have high alkalinity, also if you have low nutrients, it gives you burnt tips as well.
Okay, so this is a good point from Sean, Ocean Project. Calc does get dosed in the same ratio, but your system doesn't use them in the same way. The reason that I don't test calcium, which I should do, and this isn't advice, I'm not telling you don't test it, but the reason I don't is because any time I have tested it over the years, it's always been right. It looks after itself in my system. This might be different for everybody else, but in my systems, plural, calcium looks after itself. So maybe that's something I'm doing that does that. I don't know.
You should get the Ocean Project on. He seems to know what he's talking about.
He's bloody brilliant, you know. He's really good. Yeah. But this is the sort of thing as well, actually, that I reckon if I tested calcium every week, you'd get a better picture of what's going on.
Yeah.
So that is a good enough reason to test it. It doesn't make a difference to me.
It takes like 3 minutes. You're like you're lazier than me, and I'm literally the laziest reefer.
You are the second laziest reefer.
Yes,
Those my ground. I've got little phosphate and nitrate kits sat next to me. but they don't get much use, if I'm honest. So
Well,
we'll move on.
not good.
So, all right, so that's calcium. Got anything else to say
Magnesium
on
is even
calcium?
less to say about as far as I'm concerned.
So magnesium, I feel like you've already covered it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is where it keeps the other two separate, basically. But it's
Supposedly there are some corals that, and like I think Montipora. If you've got Monties that aren't doing well, test your magnesium.
yes, yeah,
And actually, if chances are it's low, or low magnesium causes problems. So it's one of those things that, again, I don't test it apart from ICP tests, which I should do, but it's never a problem.
that's
So
what I was gonna say because it's never a problem for me. I don't know the effects of if it's too low. I've never had to I've not come across that. If you see what I mean. So it's so what I said a minute ago was it might not be correct, but my magnesium is just always the same. So
yeah, I think with if it's you should look out for it. And if you've got problems, this is actually one thing. If you've got problems in your tank, you should test everything.
yeah,
Start with salinity, but it's that you can go looking for these little niche explanations. But the reality is, if you've got a full picture, a full suite of tests, something might be crazy off. Like I watched a Machna presentation with Malev the other day,
oh yeah,
and he was talking about his tank. He's just having problems. He couldn't work it out. And then eventually he found out that his strontium levels were half what they should be, way off.
yeah.
And I didn't ever figure out, I couldn't work out what was causing that. I think it was his salt mix or something. But it was, he did a full test. Everything was more or less fine. And this one thing eventually was way off. And that was and it's often the case that if you've got problems, one thing is what's causing it. So it's just useful to get a full picture. So magnesium. That's it. Don't let it get too high. Don't let it get too low. But it probably look after itself. Can cause problems.
It's the next bit I'm excited about because the next bit is nutrients, and people are all over the place with nutrients. They have the difference. I can see the chat, and everyone will be going, "This is what I have my nutrients at."
Well, I tell you what. Let's start with a straw poll then, shall we? So, guys in the chat,
Yeah.
what are your nitrate and phosphate levels? And this is just information because there's without the context of this is my tank, this is a photo of it, these are the corals I keep. This is useless information.
Yeah.
But I'm just interested to see what are your nitrate and phosphate levels, and me and Ryan will say what ours are. But first off, hang on, questions. So Rolly's Reef says he's just made a video on strontium. It makes your bones stronger, I think. Should we talk about strontium as a main element to test for? It is linked to calcium. Whenever my ICP tests come back, strontium's all right. So
There you go. So,
but it's one of there are some things that on the ICP test that I think are really worthwhile knowing about.
yeah,
Potassium and maybe strontium.
I would say strontium is one of the ones which can have a notable effect if it's too low.
Have you had an experience with that?
I don't know why. I don't know what it does or anything. I'll be honest with you. I just know that it's. If you said to me, "What's the next thing that you would focus on after all the main ones?" Strontium would be one of those ones for me. And then you start to get into things like manganese and molybdenum for things like goniopora and stuff like that. But I think that's too far for...
We'll come back because we're going to talk about trace elements is on the list. But I'll tell you what, we'll park that and we'll come back to it. But we'll do so. We asked the question about nitrate and phosphate. So loads of answers coming in. Nitrate 5 parts per million, pretty decent.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. 7 and 0.7, perfect ratio. 15, 0.001. Wow, that's low. That would worry me.
That is incredibly low.
It won't be accurate to parts per billion, is that? But anyway, that would bother me. Sean winning the competition. He's got the highest, 0.46. Mine's 0.28 at the moment. 0.15. 1.65 and 0.11. What's your nitrate and phosphate, Ryan? What do you run in the farm?
So they're usually for the nitrate. They're usually between one of them is usually between 2.5 and 5, and the other one is between 5 and 10. So the LPS system is between 5 and 10, and the SPS system is between 2.5 and 5. Now, I don't like it being as low as 2.5, and if it gets to 2.5, I actually dose nitrate.
Right.
And with regards to phosphate, it would be 0.0, between 0.022 to 7. It fluctuates, obviously, depending on when you use the phosphate remover. It went up to much higher than that. I can't remember what it was, but it was like 0.2 or 3 or something like that. But that went up very quickly over the course of a short period of time. And then I brought it down quicker than I probably should. I'm still, to some extent, bringing it down now. And I was in Spain 2 months ago. So that's how. But the first drop in it, I did quite quickly. And then what happens is all of a sudden you see that one frag dies, and you're like, why have you died? Why? What's different? I mean, you've got another 10 of you, which are all genetically identical, but one of you died. So that was when I started going, it doesn't matter. What's the point in rushing this? I'll just do it over a much longer period of time. So
Okay. Excuse me. What
I'm
with
sorry that I'm boring you.
I, with nitrate then? What? So my tank is a bad case study example because I find my nitrate can go all over the place. It can be really high sometimes. It can be really low others.
Yeah.
And I never notice a difference. The only time I notice anything is when nitrates and phosphates bottom out to 0.
Yeah.
And then all hell breaks loose, basically. But I never notice a difference with nitrate in my tank. And people often talk about improved coloration with higher nitrates, less coloration with lower nitrates. But I don't notice that. And I have tested sometimes, at least once. But I don't notice a difference. My tank's weird. So what difference? Because you said you don't like it to be too low. What difference do you notice?
I've had it where it hits 0 and it kills things.
Is that why? That's the same for me.
That's why, yeah. What's something that I find quite interesting is that people will focus very much on dialing in their dosing pumps to have very accurate alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium for their tanks. But then they'll get pellet food and they'll throw pellet food in, and it will be completely different on each. Do you see what I mean? Difference on different.
Yeah.
And on one day they'll put a sheet of nori in, and then a different day they'll put a grazing wheel in. And so what I've started to do with the coral farm is to see if I can actually get a consistency I have a spoon for the pellets now. So I put exactly the same amount of food in with regards to pellets and exactly the same amount of cubes in for the copper bands, so that I know the input of my tanks is exactly the same every day, no matter what.
That's good, yeah.
If that will make any difference or not, I don't know. But it's. I just think, why are we trying to get stable other parameters, but we're not focusing on our nutrient input?
So nitrate and phosphate are the points that I think can make a significant difference.
Yes.
Alkalinity, I don't really care what the alkalinity is. I'd have it at 8, but if it was at 7, that's fine. If it was at 9, whatever, I don't care.
You're dangerous. You're dangerous.
Danger is my middle name, basically.
Yeah.
I'm a double-hard bastard. But and I say I don't care. I make an effort to keep it at 8, but it's not. It doesn't bother me.
You care that it's 8, not that it's go. If it was 7 one day and 8 the next day and 7 the next day, you'd care about that. But as long as it's stable, you don't care. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't care what the number is as long as it's stable, which is what often people say about parameters generally. Nitrate and phosphate, that's different. So if you're talking about what numbers you should aim for, alkalinity, pick a number.
Yeah.
Pick a number. Get your missus to say, darling, pick a number between 7 and 10.
Yeah.
And she'll go 9. Why? And you'll be like, don't worry, it's fine. And that's it. That's your number. Alkalinity, nitrate and phosphate, different.
Yeah.
Because the only thing is like people often talk about high and low nitrate affecting coloration, and again, I don't see that in my tank. I'm not saying
I absolutely do. 100.
That's the thing. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, and so you think with this? I'm talking about nitrate alone for the moment.
Oh no, I think phosphate's the one that makes the big difference for me.
So that's why. So I'm the same as you. I don't want it to go too low because when it's got to 0 before, I get flagellates. I've had all sorts of problems. But so nitrate doesn't really change things. Phosphate is bloody annoying because I just can't get I'm too lazy to get my phosphate down.
Yeah.
But phosphate does for a fact,
Yes.
across the board, affect colours.
Yes, definitely. And I think you have quite high lights on your tank, so you can have high phosphate.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to keep a whole range of all different corals all in the same system. Although there are different lightings on different tanks.
Yeah.
In the tank that has the Montipora, I have a load of Frammers, for example. The hybrid
Yeah. Okay.
spawn hammers. So I can't have as high, so on the Acropora section of the tank, which is the same water, so it's the same system. If I put Montipora in that system where they've got high phosphate, they look amazing. And if they're on the lower light system, they're brown. So it's exactly the same water. The only difference is the lighting. So the fact you have high light probably means it doesn't matter as much that you have high phosphate.
Do you know what I need to? PAR wasn't on this list. We should talk about PAR as well. I need to test the PAR on my tank. I don't know what it is. I could have a rough guess.
I've got a
because
proper PAR meter, so you can use that.
What's wrong with the Senai? What's wrong with you
I got
slagging off my PAR meter?
those like proper ones, like the expensive.
They're really good, actually. Do you know the best thing about them is that there's a little screen that tells you the results straight away. You don't have to push it on a laptop, and it's probably more accurate. But anyway, I might see if I can buy that sometime. Because I've changed lights a million times, I do test my PAR when I change lights.
Yeah.
And I suspect that my settings and the amount of light output means that I've got the same-ish PAR now as I had before, and I know what my PAR was before. It wasn't that high. It was a peak of 350, 400 at most.
Oh, so
It was high across the entirety of the tank.
Yeah.
So there's no patches where it's like 50. My Zoas on the sandbed get like 250 in a corner.
Really?
Yeah. And they seem to be all right.
Yeah.
But phosphate is. I keep looking over my shoulder because I've texted my missus asking her for a beer. By the way.
Oh, really? Oh, that would. She texts you saying "F off" yet?
I know, yeah, possibly. But yeah, so phosphate then. But phosphate, the trouble with my tank has. Look at that! Oh, not
Bloody hell!
That's what you get.
Look at that! That is.
She's put it in a margarita glass.
Nice. It's actually. I can't see it.
It's just.
That looks so. That's so good.
She's such a wind-up merchant. Anyway, so phosphate then. I can't remember what I was going to say, but talk to us about phosphate, and I'll try to gather my thoughts while I get over
was saying
the
that absolutely does make a difference, and
Yeah.
I think that there's two things that are most notable for me with regards to phosphate. If you have high phosphate, you need to have high other things to go with it, and if you have and if you're trying to lower your phosphate, keep an eye on your alkalinity very closely, because it will affect it definitely.
Yeah, indeed. So so I think that's probably why I get away with higher phosphate, because I've been talking. Someone commented the other day on one of my videos asking about.
Does she have an older sister?
Oh yeah. She's got a younger sister, in fact. So someone commented on one of my videos the other day, asking about my phosphate. They were like, I've been watching your videos for a while. You keep talking about trying to get your phosphate level down. What are you doing wrong? And it's like, because I keep saying that in my videos. I need to get my phosphate down. I'm just too bloody lazy.
Yeah.
But part of the reason I don't make a massive effort is because everything does look pretty good at the moment.
Yeah.
Like most people, if you've got a phosphate of 0.3, which is what mine is, or even it went 0.6 at one point. Most people with that level of phosphate, the tank will look awful.
Yeah.
So that's why I think, well, actually, my tank looks pretty good. My corals aren't brown.
Yeah.
So I'm not that bothered about it. I really want to see what happens when I get it down.
Yeah.
But I obviously don't want to see that much because I've been talking about it for so long that people are like, oh, what's going on?
It's what will probably happen is you'll lower it and half the corals will die because they've grown used to being at a higher level.
If I did it quickly, but I think if I did it slowly, I think it would be all right.
No, yeah. And then what would probably happen is you'd then get increased growth. It's funny because on one hand, you're trying to increase your growth with kalkwasser, whatever it is, yeah. But on the other hand, you have high phosphate, which is inhibiting your growth.
Exactly a point I made on my video on Friday, actually.
Oh, well, if I had watched it, I'd know that.
Yeah, I know, but that's absolutely right. I really would like to get. I really should do. And I've started using Rophos, but I'd love to get my phosphate down. I don't think it would make some of my corals. No, I don't. I've got one coral at the moment that is really nice. It's a deep blue acro, really bright blue. And for the last 6 months or something, it's gone sort of a little bit brown in the centre. Don't really know why, but none of my other corals are brown. None of my other corals look like they're suffering from high phosphate, and it's probably because everything is quite high. I've also got high export, although I don't run ROFOS. Well, I do, but I don't change it regularly. I've got a filter roller. I've got a refugium, a big, well, lots of light. I've got a skimmer. I've got Cyprax, all this sort of stuff. I do water changes, so I've got quite high export. So I think it's not like, I think I get throughput,
Yeah.
but I couldn't tell you the reason that everything's okay. And I would not, in an ideal world, I would have it a tenth of what it is.
Yeah, yeah. It's do it's literally left my head. I was thinking of something for ages while you were talking, and it's literally just gone like that.
Yeah, okay.
It was about phosphate. What was I going to say? Oh, that's what it was. How often do you test it?
What, phosphate?
Yes.
In sporadically, once a month. Because
If you start testing it once a week, and also, so you've changed the ROFOS, and then that's good. That ching means I've got a sale on the website, so I'll turn that.
cool.
If that's gone again. Oh yeah, if you start testing it every week, it becomes very rewarding, because as that number goes down, you get like a little boost of serotonin that goes, oh look, it's no longer 100. If it's the obviously ultra low phosphorus, it's now 50, and then the next week it goes down to 40, and each time you're like, it's what I'm doing is actually making an impact, so it's worth doing. But if you definitely don't test, you don't see it.
And that puts you in tune with your tank as well. You get to know your tank.
Yes.
And this is my little black book for my water box, and I don't know how easily I'll be able to read it while showing you, but this is where I record all my phosphate. So phosphate, I was testing fairly regularly, 0.07, 0.07, 0.03, 0.13, 0.3, 0.3, 0.25, and it's really high. But I knew what was going on with that, and I know why it was going up and down. It is really interesting. That's the other way around, annoyingly, but it is really interesting to see your phosphate levels.
Yeah.
And actually, that in particular. So someone asked, I'm going to get a master. What's the one that Mastertronic that tests everything? Mastertronic.
Yeah.
I'm going to get one of those for my water box.
Interesting, because it's almost like you've learned automatic testing isn't quite what you want it to be, and then you're like, I'm still going to go get something else.
Why did you say it's not what I want it to be? Oh, what, Salinity?
No, well, all of them. I find that
Alkalinity probes, the Alkalinity testers. I had a bad experience with the GHL.
Yeah.
But I think that was more isolated to me, because GHL's generally got a very good reputation. But the two refractory KH keepers, I love them. They both given to me for free, so make this what you will.
Yeah.
The first one I got, the smaller one, it comes with a tiny little pH probe. When I saw it, I was like, I wonder if that's going to be a cheapo one. It'd be a bit crap. I've still got the same pH probe 2 years later, and it still is. It's dialed in nicely.
How often do you maintain it?
Very rarely.
Interesting.
To be fair, I haven't checked against a new HANA checker for a while, to be fair.
Yeah.
But I have done it from time to time, every 6 months or so. I had to throw away my alkalinity reagent on the HANA because I check so infrequently. But whenever I do, it's rough. I know, half a DKH or whatever, an acceptable range. They're fantastic, but master headache. That's hilarious.
That's what I read. It's interesting because people have different experiences, but to some extent, I wonder if those experiences are down to people not maintaining things properly. Because I'm the worst for it. I'm the worst person for maintaining things and calibrating them. So if my experience isn't what I want it to be, it's actually my own fault.
But that's why I love the one of the reasons I love the KH keeper, because it takes all this abuse. I would have thought I'd have to calibrate the pH probe all the time, calibrate the dosing pumps, but it's fine. It just works, and I don't have to do anything with it. But the Mastertronic, they're very expensive and they're bloody massive.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of this. If they made a phosphate tronic that just tested phosphate, the trouble with that is I bet it would be quite expensive. So you wouldn't save much money over the one that tests all these other things as well.
Yeah.
But something that just tests nitrate and phosphate, I'm up for that.
I remember my excitement when I first saw these because I saw them at Interzoo before they were well
Yeah, okay.
known. That was when they were like the first release, and I remember seeing them going, "This is gonna be life changing," and like 5 years later, I'm still not where they're not where I want them to be. If you see what I mean. But what I want is that probe you're talking about, where you just puts it in, tests everything,
Yeah.
and does it all for you.
Yeah, yeah. I'm afraid, yeah, never going to happen, is it? But what? So, were you not tempted to buy? Because you run GHL, the Profilux. Are you not tempted to get the KH Director?
I've got the cage directors, and
Oh,
they're
right. Don't you
fine.
like it?
They're fine. Look, as I said, the problem is me, not the product. Because when they're brand new, they work fine. But after a period
Right.
of time, I've noticed that the number isn't correct, and they must know this as well because there's an option on them where you can change the result. So let's say their result is
Yes.
normally out by 1 DKH.
Yeah.
You can then change it so that it automatically reads out by 1 DKH. So they must know there's an issue.
I think you can do the same on the refractory one, but I don't understand why you'd want to do that.
Well, it's
Because it's like having a red light come on your boiler and you just put a bit of tape over it.
yes. But look, we both know that it's about as long as they're reading a consistent reading, it doesn't matter if it's reading 7, 8, 1, 10, as long as it's reading exactly the same thing every day, then it's fine, isn't it? As long as it's not
Exactly.
actually one.
Well, yeah, indeed. I'm refactoring making one for phosphate and nitrate. Yeah, it's called the Smart Tester, and it tests one parameter at a time. You can set it so it tests anything, but it will only do one at a time. It's not in the market yet, and I don't know how much it's going to cost.
Reef Kinetics just bought a new one out as well. They were one of the first people, I think.
The ReefBot Pro or something, wasn't it?
Yeah,
ReefBot
yeah.
Pro.
I remember seeing that. That was at Macna, I think I first saw that.
For some reason, that just like so that the what's it called? The Mastertronic, really popular.
Yeah.
ReefBot, not so much. Got a bit of traction early on, and I don't know why. Maybe it was crap, but
I'm not sure. From the look of both of them, I actually prefer the look of the Reef Bot because it's got these like little like metal gears and stuff like that, and you can see things moving around. Whereas the Master Trike is all closed up, isn't it? So you can't see
did you
anything.
did you see my face then a second ago?
But when I said that I didn't see
When I
it,
went,
1 second on, there's like a 10-second delay on.
yeah,
the-
yeah. Well, you've missed it. My jaw literally dropped because I googled ReefBot Pro.
Oh, I saw it. Yeah, it's just come up on the thing. There's like
Oh,
a
really? That's
10-second
hilarious.
delay. You went
Guess how much the ReefBot Pro is? It tests it's
I'm gonna say
up
900.
to £3,000.
Oh God. Okay.
This I don't know if that's Australian dollars or something, but it says $3,000. No, I think that's US dollars. No way. If I've got that wrong, do please check. It might be a different dollar that is, but $3,000. That's insane.
I would
Good
rather
luck with
test
that.
my own water myself. I actually don't mind doing people hate doing water tests,
Yeah, I
but
do.
I genuinely I don't mind doing them. I usually put YouTube on my laptop.
Yeah, you don't put my bloody channel on, do you?
No, I don't put your channel. I only put good channels on. Normally I just watch my channel over and over again.
Do you actually?
No, I very, very rarely I go back and watch an old video. What I usually do is I will spend the day editing a video, and then because when you're editing it, it's not the same as when you sit down and watch it.
No.
Like so once I've uploaded it because I've finished editing it, about an hour later I'll go back and watch it and go, was that good or was that not good? And usually I go, that was a bit rubbish. But yeah.
All righty. And this is so Scott McMillan says that's what we need, an automatic phosphate tester, and then we can just adjust your pump for your rows or doser. I don't know what that means. Rower?
Yeah, it would be rare, I assume.
But you don't dose rower phos, do you?
No, but I think what they're saying is if you have more water going through the reactor, in theory, it would increase the amount that's absorbed.
I don't think the control of rower phos is that fine. But
I
yeah.
think so.
But something like lanthanum, you can drip in literally on a doser. Whether you want to do it is another matter. But yeah, it's 3,000. I can't believe that. I don't, because I'm with the Mastertronic. I'm looking at it going 1,200 quid. It's a lot of money, and I'm trying to sell a load of frags to my local fish shop to get store credit, so I can bring the price down a little bit.
Yeah.
But even then, even if I got halfway, I'm not sure I'm going to do it. And $3,000, even I don't care what it tests. That's crazy money.
Someone
It says it.
Well, one of those links have come up, but if you could just save that link for me for later, it says my hot photo. So I'd like,
The annoying thing is, so on this software,
there's no link, so you can't click it. That's the annoying thing.
no, yeah. The software on my previously before, I could just click on it and block it.
Yeah.
This software doesn't let me block it, so I can post it. Hello, Triple X69 online.
Yeah.
But I can't bloody block it. So, shots fired. Someone's having a fight. I don't know what that's about. I've missed it.
Neither do I.
Reef Dork. Everyone should watch. Reef Dork. Hang on. Everyone should watch the YouTube video Reef Bum did with Paul Dassano. Baldassano. Who's that? Do you know what? I stacked up a couple of. I went in my watch later queue. I found I had 3 Reef Bum videos, and I deleted them earlier today because I was like, I can't face 5 hours of YouTube. But I think he was one of them, but I didn't know who he was. Paul Bassano. Oh yeah, he's got a 51-year-old reef tank. That's not my cup of tea. Yeah, that's not my cup of tea, to be honest. I'm not going to watch that. I think that's really cool, but I don't want to watch an hour and 45 minutes of someone talking about an old reef tank.
Do they show the tank though?
I suspect they will do. Let me see if I can find it. It looks
You
like
watch all sorts of rubbish on YouTube. You're constantly on YouTube, but you're not going to watch that.
I don't tend to like. I mean, I know this is hypocritical, but I don't tend to like live streams because they're too long.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So I know exactly. But anyway, let's not. No one wants to know what I like watching on YouTube. Yeah, and Les is on it. Cheers, mate. I've hidden them from the channel so they can't come back. Ryan doesn't watch your channel. Yeah.
Oh no, he knows that. That's not shots fired. That's a given.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he say it every week.
That's
why I get Sean on. Sean doesn't say that.
Yeah, that's because Sean just pretends, and no one really watches it. So.
Yeah, talking about an airline feeding Rifos. I don't think it's that accurate to dial in, but nice idea if it works. Anywho, what was I going to say? So we get back on topic. Phosphate, done. Trace elements. Oh, we started talking about trace earlier. It was a good conversation. We should have kept going. Forgotten what we were saying. Trace elements. When I come to power, president of the world.
Yeah.
I will.
Week, isn't it?
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah.
When I will pass a law that says when you go into a local fish shop.
Yeah.
And you say, I'd like to buy some trace elements, please. You will need to prove that you have done everything else on your to-do list before you're allowed to buy trace elements. So you will need to prove you are filtering your own water. You will need to prove that you have you've got flow correct. You've not got too much, not got too little. That you're not blasting your corals with light. Yeah. You'll need to prove that you're doing 10% water changes every week. You'll need to prove that your phosphate and nitrate isn't out of whack. You'll need to prove all this stuff, and then, and only then, will you be allowed to buy trace elements.
So you've come into power, and that's the thing you're going to do.
Job 1, job 2, well piece, and all that sort of stuff. But job 1, it's not that I'm not saying trace elements aren't important. Of course they are. There's no doubt about it. It's just that I don't think they're anywhere near as important as most people think they are.
Yeah.
And it's not. The other thing is because people often say, "Should I be dosing trace? Do I need to dose trace?" And it's one of those things that you can pick up on quite early and think, "Well, I must need to," and it makes perfect sense. But actually, if you look at if you do an ICP test on a tank where you're doing water changes, particularly. Yeah. I bet you most of your trace elements are going to be more or less okay. There'll be 2 or 3 that aren't.
Iodine
most will be
out.
all right. Iodine is 0 always.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Manganese is always 0 on my tank anyway.
Yeah.
And there are a couple that are. But...
I think that is something that you only ever buy something for your tank if you can test for it. So if you've got a bottle of strontium, but you have no idea what your strontium is, then I think is the term like pissing in the wind? Or is that where you're just like,
That's it.
yeah, that's what you say, isn't it?
It is. It's a
Yeah,
brilliant saying.
it's
It conjures up a mental image.
you're just clutching at straws. You're just trying something, and you have no idea if it's going to work or not. You're just hoping it's going to work. Whereas if you've done an ICP test and it says that your manganese is low or your molybdenum, I hate that word. I can't say it.
Molybdenum.
Molybdenum is low, or your strontium is low, then yes, dose appropriately. But what I do is actually just I have an ICP test done incrementally, maybe every 3 months or so, and adjust them then. I don't actively dose them constantly. Not every day do I have molybdenum going into my tank. I just dose them when the amount that's required to get them back up to the same level, and then go back to doing the water changes again. So it's like a maintenance dose.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't dose any trace elements at all, with the exception of manganese, which I have on a doser. If I was going to dose, I've tried trace elements in the past. I even recently bought Tropic Marine A and K trace elements, and then I changed my mind and I sold them. But I don't like the scattergun approach of trace elements.
Yeah.
And I've tried before when I've tried dialing it in and making sure I'm setting the right amount and all this sort of stuff, but it's quite difficult. And like you say, you can't test for it, and even if you could, you're not going to do 30 tests each time you start dosing trace element. And Sean and I disagree on this. He says it's controversial, and I know he's a big fan of trace elements. All I'm really saying is, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying that
That's true.
It's not.
He's
it's
just
not an issue.
saying you do dose traces in your 2-part. So,
Well, exactly, yeah, and I replaced some of it through water changes, a very small amount, but nonetheless. But it's in Balling Classic too. There you go. But this is the thing. It's in. What I mean is, I don't separately dose the Red Sea coral colors or the Tropic Marine A and K or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it's important, because you will get it from other sources. And I think it's easy to think of it and think, these 2 bottles of trace elements, that's the missing link. That's why that's everything else I've got spot on. That's going to solve my problems, and it won't. I don't think it's massively important.
I mean,
for most people.
Sometimes they solve my problems, but that's just.
So tell us then. So what problems do they solve? Tell us.
It's usually with Goniopora, I find, and I can't remember which one it is.
Yes.
Or it might even be both of them, but it's definitely one of the M's, manganese or molybdenum.
Manganese, probably. So I've started dosing manganese because of gonies.
Yes. I didn't even know you had gonies, do you?
I bought some recently, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I went to another online coral vendor. It's my favourite, Signature Frags. Much better. So.
Okay. Yeah, so you got better coral.
I bought them from a local hobbyist.
I don't care anyway, as if it matters. What I love when I go to people's houses, I was at someone's house yesterday. They're like, "I bought this the other day from a shop, but I wasn't sure if I should tell you." I'm like, "I don't care. Why would I care?"
Yeah.
So it's almost like they want to keep it as their like dirty little secret. But yes. So I basically, if the gonies for whatever reason aren't as happy as they're not like out as happy as they usually are, I'll do an ICP test, and then that will tell me what I need to dose. And it's interesting because there's certain corals that we can use. Is there a certain coral that you use where you know something's off?
Canary in the coal mine. Not really. I used to have a stylo that did that.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I don't have anything. I've got a Monty. What is it? A Gold Rush Monty that's really fussy.
Yeah.
But I think you look at it funny and it goes. So I don't really have that at the moment.
Sunset Montipora, where they're orange with green, for phosphate. For me anyway, if the phosphate's too high, the orange disappears and they'll turn brown. And the gonies are the ones in the LPS tray where I know what some of the trace elements are out. Because I look at them, I go, yeah, they're not as happy today. Do an ICP test. All of a sudden, do trace elements, back to normal.
Okay, so I have a massive Sunset Monty, and it looks brilliant, bright green and red all the time.
Even that, again, that might be because of your light.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Exactly. Yeah. Just everything basically across the board.
yeah.
But yeah. So trace element. The thing with trace elements, my method. I'm not saying you should never dose trace elements. No one should do all that sort of stuff. Of course, it will work for some people, but really, what I really mean is that my preferred method is to use a dosing solution that does put trace elements in, and do water changes every week, because there are 1,000 reasons to do it and only one reason not to: lazy. And I'm as lazy as anyone, as we've discovered. But any time I've tried trace elements, it's never made it. And I've tried on a number of occasions with a number of different products. It's never made a difference. And I've tried all sorts of things. I've talked to people to make sure I'm doing it right. It's never made a significant difference for me. And the people I hear talking about using trace elements to fix their problems, it's not that's not the cause of your problems. Most often, I think.
But if you lost a coral today and you just couldn't work out what it was, what would you assume it was? Because it's entirely possible that coral has had such low trace elements for a long period of time that it's been starved of something that it needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So ICP tests are great for that, and some people seem to hate ICP tests.
It's the cost. That's why they hate them.
Some people say that they're not accurate, all this sort of stuff, but I really like ICP tests for that exact reason, to have a finger on the pulse. And I think for me, if you've got something that's way off, yeah, you're damn right, I want to know about it, and I'm going to dose that. But I'm not just going to broadcast dose everything just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. So my manganese, for example, is very low, and I think that's probably why I've not had any luck with gunnies in the past. So now I dose, someone's asked, 2 milliliters per day I dose of Triton manganese, and that's just gone up from 1 milliliter per day because I did an ITP test and it came back 0 still.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to push it much higher, because 2 milliliters a day in 400 liters is actually quite a lot, and I don't think it needs to go any higher than that. And if I'm putting in 2 mil per day, that's going somewhere. So I'm hoping, and we'll see, early days, but I'm hoping my gunnies will be happy now.
How long have you had them?
A month.
Oh, so
not long.
Yeah, so still time to see what. Sometimes it takes a little while before they die. They're ones that known where they can be happy as anything, and then 6 months later they're dead. But those things are not as often anymore. I think that it was. That used to hear that story all the time, whereas I don't hear that as much anymore, and I grow them like they're going out of fashion here.
So someone told me a while ago that part of the reason for, because gunnies were harder to keep in days gone by, part of the reason for that is that there's more manganese in salt now, in salt powder.
Oh, okay.
So someone worked out that you need that. So so you start getting more. I don't know if that's true, but it sounds entirely believable and actually probably likely.
Yeah.
But gunnies, I've never been able to keep gunnies ever, and I suspect it's because of that. But we'll find out, because I've had gunnies in the past that have been fine for, like you say, for 6 months, and then they wither and die. And obviously the reason for that is not something that suddenly killed them. They weren't fine for 6 months. They just looked all right, and they got to the point where after 6 months of missing whatever it was, they finally went, you know what, I've had enough. Bollocks to this. I'm going to.
They're one of the things in my system, in the LPS tray, that just do so well for some reason. Alveopora are the same. They were those. I don't get me wrong. I did have a patch where all of a sudden they weren't doing so well, but generally speaking, I grow them so quickly. And, you know, the Bernardipora as well, with the short polyps.
Yeah.
That grows really, really well.
So yeah, I tried a few of those and they were the same for me, just withered and dying. They're bloody expensive.
They are.
I spent like £100 on three tiny little frags.
Yeah.
And they all died, and it's like, mate, come on.
Well, next time you're here, I'll sort you out. I got 4 different types. I think I've got 2 different gold ones, a red and yellow one, and a pink one.
Are they on your website?
The gold ones are, yes. I think.
Gold
Well, they're under
Goniopora.
Goniopora, and I know they're Bernardopora. It's just people. That's it, yeah. But do you know what everyone says? They go, that coral is not justified from that picture. It's so much nicer in person.
That summarizes all of
All of my
your corals,
pictures, yeah, I
basically.
know. But
Um,
they grow really quickly at the moment, so the cost of those will come down because they like I think I've got 8 frags of it at the moment, and I can cut all those in half, and then all of a sudden I'll have 16 frags of it.
Very good. Someone asked earlier how often I do ICP tests. Not very often, to be honest. I once every 6 months, once a year, maybe. If I, it's. Can you still hear me? By the way,
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
just everything's gone funny. Anyway, so if I could, two things. I can't really be asked to do ICP tests because it is a bit of a faff. I go to the shop and buy one, then you got to fill it, and then you got to go to the post office, which is, 3 minutes of effort.
You got to enter it online. That's the bit I don't like. I go to the post office anyway.
That's true.
If I got to enter it. Oh,
Exactly, it is a bit of a pain, and then the trouble is you don't get instant results, so you got to wait for a week or two before they come back, and it's like, oh, I'd forgotten what I was looking at now. But I do like doing them occasionally, and I've found when I the things I want to know from an ICP are there any heavy metals in my tank?
yeah.
And I often, if a coral is not looking healthy, I'll do an ICP test if I can't work out like all normal parameters are right. I'll do an ICP test.
Yeah.
And I've found that before it's told me heavy metals are in my tank. I went looking, and it was my MP40s wet sides rusting. Throw them away, buy a new one, job done.
Yeah.
A couple of water changes, everyone's happy. And then the other thing is for certain levels of trace elements like manganese, like iodine in particular. What else? There was something else I'd done regularly, but those sorts of things that I want to get. I want to get roughly right. Weirdly, iodine at the moment is showing I've got a decent reading of iodine in my tank. I've never had that before, and I'm not adding it.
It's interesting. Because that is one of the things which is almost always down.
It's always 0 on mine.
Yeah.
James asks, "Are you fragging your gunnies alveoporas?"
Yeah, I frag them all the time, but I do it with a bandsaw or like a Gryphon saw. Yeah. It would be very difficult to frag. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, you could literally frag them with a hammer and chisel if you wanted to, but it's not going to look very pretty.
I fragged a Cyphastria with a hammer and crowbar this weekend.
But it's like you can frag anything with a hammer and a crowbar if you think about it. It just doesn't look very pretty at the end of it.
It was a very thin end, a sharp crowbar, and the Cyphastria was this big. I just wanted it cut in half because it couldn't fit where I wanted it to go. So, I found
I do of things like that sometimes. Like this will shock people. Sometimes I will literally just take if it's like a huge piece and it won't fit under the coral saw, like because obviously I'm buying tank breakdowns all the time. Sometimes I will literally just take the rock and just drop it, and then the rock obviously smashes into pieces, and then I cut the rock into smaller pieces with the saw. But yeah, there's no what is it like? Gently caring for them when they first come in.
Did you do that with my massive rock?
Definitely not.
Oh, thank God for that. They're my children.
No, there's some rocks you can. You can do it with real live rock, but you can't do it so much with new rock because it's so hard.
Okay, yeah. Do you know what?
It's like the bane of my existence because it destroys every saw blade when you use it to cut them.
What kind of rock? Like real reef rock or whatever?
Yeah, all of them. Carib Seas rock, real reef rock. When you use a saw blade, it basically just obliterates them very quickly. And then like 30 quid, I think, a go. So
right. Do you know what I found? So I removed that enormous chunk of a third of my corals basically a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Absolutely bloody enormous bit. And it was covered in this massive LA Lakers Monty, which I've taken to my local fish shop. And I wanted to get just the LA Lakers Monty off. For a start, I'll talk about rescaping, actually. It's a lot less intimidating than you think. But I just wanted to get this just one LA Lakers Monty off. And I was thinking it's going to be encrusted all over the place. This is going to smash into 1,000 pieces. But I managed to chisel away everything. Yeah. And I found hammer and chisel basically on the real reef rock. It cracked really nicely and evenly and predictably. But then that was that when you get down to the finer points with the bandsaw, it's a bit
Yeah.
harder, isn't it?
See, I wouldn't do it. Remember what you gave me? You obviously gave me loads of like SPS and branches and stuff like that. You could only do with the drop method when it's like an entire encrusting Cephastra or Leptocerus or something like that, where it doesn't really matter where it breaks, and then you can cut it into small pieces. I know it's not. Look, it's one of those things where it's one of those secret things where you're not meant to know about it. But I don't. I do it rarely. I would do it, but I do it sometimes.
Behind the scenes.
It's only with massive rocks that you can't use for the saw.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's because it's too big. It won't fit, I guess.
Yeah.
But so the one thing with I've done 2 rescapes recently, where I've pulled out basically a third of my corals.
Yeah.
And that's really put me off for a million reasons. One, what if I drop the rock and I smash the glass? Which was well within my mind. Is this going to be? Am I going to kill all my corals? Am I going to lose fish? All these sorts of things. The only problems I've had on this one most recently, as I was lifting the rock out, so as it was about, I don't know, 7-8 feet off the ground, 7 feet off the ground probably. There was an urchin on it, and the urchin lost his grip and smacked on my ladder and died.
Oh.
That was quite sad. So I lost that, and on the first time around I did it, my blenny had hidden in the rock.
Yeah.
So because he's an idiot, I looked to see, and there was nothing, but I missed him obviously. And as I put the rock down, he flipped out. But fortunately, I could just put him straight back in.
Yeah.
But that was about as bad as it got. The rest of it was actually really quite easy. I didn't have any major Well, first one, my alkalinity spiked and one of my corals stripped.
That was with
But
that was the one I took, wasn't it?
What, the stripped one?
Yeah, the first rock that I got.
Oh yeah, you took the rock, yeah,
Yeah.
My nice coral that was left behind stripped. But the reason it stripped was because it was an unhealthy coral, unfortunately. But so apart from that, I didn't really have any major problems. And actually, I think I would encourage you to do a rescape.
For me,
Not you personally.
I can't do a rescape.
Not you. Well, yeah, you've just got a frag rack, haven't you, basically? LA Lakers Monty or Scroll Turban Area? Are you asking which is better? Or are you asking which one mine was? I don't like the Turban Area personally. But I do quite like the LA Lakers Monty. But trouble, all Monties are a pain in the ass because they grow too quick.
Yeah, I noticed that you're like basically getting rid of all the Monties in your tank. So.
But even the bloody Tropic Thunder that I ripped out, it started growing back.
Has it?
And when I pulled it out, there were a couple of specks, and I was like, "I'll get to that. I'll cover them in what's putty," and I didn't do it, and now it's like, oh.
Yeah, I did the same. I stripped loads of it. I had probably over a foot of it from it was your strain that I got rid of, and yeah. So basically, I had to pull a whole foot square out of it and throw it away because it's just insane, that coral, and it's starting to grow back. So. Because it grows in between the frag plug, where the frag plugs goes into the holes.
Yeah,
it goes in there, and then when you pull the whole thing off, it leaves little bits in the holes.
The beauty of my frag tank, I just have there is a rockscape underneath, but on top of it, I've got an egg crate frag rack basically.
Yeah.
And the beauty of that is egg crate is so cheap. When it gets covered in things like Monties, or sometimes it gets covered in algae, I pull it out, pull all the corals off, throw it away, get a new one, and then I've solved all my problems. It's wicked.
Yeah, that's what I do with the Xenia. I have it in a big plastic tray, and I throw the whole tray away. When it's growing on the plugs and everything, it's fine. But then what it does, it grows all up to the side of the tray. Take the tray out, leave it in the garden usually, and it all dies off. Clear it off, and then put a brand new tray in. And then when that one's done, and then keep swapping them over. I don't mind when it's growing on the rack. It's when it's growing up the side and wants to escape that it's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's creeping into your bedroom at night.
Yeah.
That's when it's a problem.
Yeah.
All right. We've covered everything that was on my list. Yeah. I don't have anything else to talk about. Do you have anything that we've... Oh, actually, good question. Eric Shevket. Do you dose bacteria on a regular basis?
I do not.
I don't either. That's another thing that I think is overthinking things.
It's look, there is some from the BRS thing, it shows that there is something in it. We just don't know what that is yet. If you see what I mean. And I also think it depends on how you run your tank. If you start it with live rock, you've got plenty of bacteria as it is. If you start it and it's a sterile tank, you've got very little bacteria.
There's some experienced and skillful reefers who do this. So this isn't just a thing that that newbies fall for, like a snake oil. Some experienced people who know what they're doing dose bacteria. So I'm not saying I'm right and they're wrong. And bacteria, I think we all probably agree that bacteria is a lot more important than we realise, and we'll find that out in the next 10 years or whatever. But the thing I don't like about it in particular is the chances are if you're adding more bacteria in, it's probably going to die, because there's only so much bacteria you can have, right? And it's likely to be the same strand. And what bacteria you're adding, the bottles don't tell you. It's not like this is an iodine bacteria, the equivalent or whatever. And you can't test for it. You can in America with a microbiome test, but over here you can't. I don't see the point. And I've never known anyone to say, do you know what? If you've got a problem like Dino's, then sometimes that might possibly help. But I've never known anyone to say, do you know what? I started dosing a bacteria. Wow, you should see how nice my corals look. So until I've heard 1,000 people tell me that, I'm not going to bother.
Well,
and on that bombshell,
the only thing I'll mention very quickly, shameless plug, only because Gareth mentioned it a minute ago, saying he's going to go buy the Luna Leptoceras. If Gareth buys it tonight, there is currently a 20% discount on the corals at the moment. And that's purely because it's going to be difficult to do a discount for Black Friday because shipping is there's a Royal Mail strike. So I'm doing more discount at the moment. So if you want to get it tonight because it's 20% off.
That you've just cost yourself 20% of a sale, Ryan.
No, because it says on the website when you go on there 20% off tonight.
Oh, I see. Right. Fair enough. Okay.
But and he'll soon see that, I'm sure. But yes, that's it basically from me.
This is my favourite comment. I have 3 TVs in the house, all of them watching this.
Really? No matter what room I'm in, I don't mean. Oh, so it's the same person watching all 3 TVs.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing.
I thought they had 3 family members watching.
I see. Yeah.
I thought, why do these family members not like each other?
But he might well be taking, or like making a joke. But imagine if you were living in the house with this person who's got a YouTube channel on 3 TVs, and you're like, oh mate, turn it off.
Well, someone posted something on mine, a picture on mine today, and they've got some sort of screen stuck to their tank. I assume for a reason, maybe to monitor something or parameters or something. It's just this, it's like an iPhone stuck to the tank, and you can see it there permanently, and they're watching my video on the screen, which is stuck to the tank.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so you can plug your tablet into your Apex or whatever. Or
that's probably what it is then. You
can have one for refactory stuff as well.
I just see what Ocean Projects rate 21%.
21%. Yeah, and there's a price war.
So, well, if it's 21% off, I'm going to go buy Ocean Projects corals.
Yeah.
So, and then sell them at a 20% discount. Make 1%. You see, that's the smart way of doing it.
Yeah, nice. Alrighty, let's just see. There's a bunch of comments have come in. Let's have a look. They won't sell me a whale shark. What the hell? Where's that come from? How often would you suggest an ICP test? As often as you can afford.
Yeah.
I even then, I don't know if you gave me 1,000 ICP tests, I don't know if I'd send one off every week.
I think David Saxby religiously every Thursday or Sunday or Friday. There's a specific day religiously. Every week he gets one done. Yeah,
but David Saxby lives in Hyde Park.
Yeah.
Which, for those of you who don't know, is a posh area of London, an extremely nice area of London. Sunday's my day. Yeah, get out, 3 TVs. All right. Anyway, so how often would you suggest an ICP test? As often as you need is the better answer, I think. But
on average, and this is a very loose average, it would be I do them sort of every 3 months. So for a year is what I would do, but some people do them every month.
That's the figure I have in my mind, but I never do them that often.
Yeah, it's just
I'll often buy them and they sit in the cupboard for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah, I've got 3 upstairs at the moment actually, which I just haven't seen off.
but as often as you need them, because if you, I don't think you, if you like if you had £1,000,000 to spend on ICP tests, I wouldn't do one every week for the rest of my life. I would do one every week to start with, and then you find, like, say you wanted to do it to get your manganese levels right.
Yeah.
Do an ICP test, see what the result is, and then the next week after your test, dose some manganese. Do another one. If it's still 0, dose some more manganese, and keep going until you get a reading, or until you reach a point that feels like you're dosing too much. And that's as often as I would do it. But really, ICP tests for me are not something you do all the time. They'd be something I would do if I think I can't work out what a problem is, or if I'm starting to think, I wonder if my gonnies are dying because I've not got manganese or anything. So
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you all for watching. Any final words of wisdom or comments, Ryan?
No, I'm not sure I gave any words of wisdom, did I?
Any wisdom?
I
No,
just
you
turned
didn't
up.
actually. That's a very good point. Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Am I back next week, or are you gonna, like, just abandon me again?
If I can find someone better.
So
literally anybody, if you're watching and you want to come on.
yeah, I'll start a rival one. I'll start with every time that you get someone else, I'll be doing it as well.
Hang on. Chris is desperate to know about power cuts. We've covered this before. Battery backup for an Ecotech pump if you can. A generator if you're really desperate and you're really worried. That's about it.
Yeah.
Right. Happy days.
Done.
Bye, guys. And literally one last thing. Don't buy whale shark. Bye.